The photograph was 4 inches by 6 inches, and it cost me nothing to mail. I found it at the bottom of a cardboard box in my parents' attic on a Saturday in March, the year I turned 24. The box had a masking tape label that said Misc Photos 2000 to 2006, and it smelled like my childhood bedroom. That particular combination of dry cardboard and something faintly floral I had never been able to name, a smell that meant the house on Fenwick Road, a smell that meant being small. I was only in the attic because my mom had asked if I could help clear some space before my parents had the insulation redone. It was not supposed to be an important afternoon. I had planned to be done by 3 and on the road back to Columbus by 4. I had a load of laundry waiting. I had a freelance project due Tuesday. I had a life in Columbus that had nothing to do with this house anymore, or so I had been telling myself for 2 years. The box was the third one I opened. The first 2 were Christmas ornaments and old tax returns. This one I almost put back when I saw the label. I figured it was pictures of vacations I didn't remember and birthday parties where everyone looked younger and uncomfortable.
I was almost right.
There was a shot of my parents at some event I didn't recognize, my mother in a red dress, my father in a jacket he no longer owns. There was a blurry image of our old dog Biscuit sleeping on the den couch, which made me stop for exactly 4 seconds before I set it aside. There were birthday parties. A Halloween I remembered. A Christmas at my grandmother's house that I did not. And then, near the bottom, wedged between 2 pictures that had stuck together with age, Easter 2004. I was 6 years old in it. Claudia was 11. We were both in our good dresses. Mine was yellow with white lace at the collar, hers was navy with a satin sash, and we were standing in my grandparents' backyard with a dogwood tree in the background, the one that bloomed every April without fail, white blossoms against the gray Ohio sky. Claudia had her arm around me. She was holding my hand. I was crying. Not a little. My face was red and my mouth was open, and I was clearly in the middle of something real, something that had been going on long enough to make my eyes swell and my shoulders round forward in that particular way of a child who has stopped expecting anyone to notice. And Claudia was looking directly at the camera, not at me. Her expression was not unkind. It was composed. It was the expression of someone managing a situation, not someone comforting a person. I stood in the attic holding that photograph for a long time. The late afternoon light came in flat and pale through the one small window above the rafters. Dust moved slowly in the beam. Somewhere downstairs my mother was running the vacuum over the living room rug, the same rug she has had since 1998, the same sound I fell asleep to as a child. My car was outside in the driveway, and the drive back to Columbus was 4 hours, and I had work on Monday morning, and I stood there holding that photograph with both hands, and I did not move. I put it in my coat pocket. I did not say anything about it to my mother. I drove home. Here is what my family had been saying about my childhood for as long as I could remember, that I was sensitive, that I took things hard, that I had a way of remembering situations more dramatically than they had actually happened. My mother said it gently. She always said it gently, in the voice she used for things she had said so many times they no longer required thought. You've always felt things deeply, Wren, you just sometimes remember the feeling and not the event. My sister Claudia said it with the patient authority of someone 5 years older, who had been in the room and had the information I lacked. You're imagining things again. You always do this. My father, when he was still present in the way he is now less present, said nothing on the subject at all, which was its own kind of answer. I want to be careful about how I tell you this because I spent a long time not being careful about it, letting the story get shapeless in my own head, wondering if they were right, cycling through every conversation and every memory the way you do when you have been told often enough that your internal data is corrupt. So let me be precise. I was not claiming abuse. I was not claiming cruelty in any dramatic or recognizable form. What I was claiming, and what I had been claiming since I was old enough to put it into words, was smaller than that, and in some ways harder to explain. I was claiming that there had been a version of our childhood in which I was not doing well, and that the family's response to that version had been to make it disappear, not by addressing it, not by asking me what was wrong, but by deciding that whatever I was feeling was a misread of events, a product of my own overdramatic nervous system, and that the correct and kind and helpful response was to patiently explain to me that I was confused. Claudia was the one who said it most often. She had a way of delivering it that I could never quite find fault with in the moment. Calm, informed, not unkind. That's not how I remember it. I was there, Wren. I'm telling you what actually happened. You've always done this, taken a small thing and turned it into something bigger in your head. Said enough times, by someone you love and who loves you, it does something to the architecture of your own certainty. It makes you treat your own memory as a first draft, always in need of someone else's corrections. I remember the first time I tried to tell someone outside the family. I was 14, talking to a school counselor about something unrelated, and I mentioned in passing that my older sister was always correcting my memories of events. The counselor looked at me with careful attention and asked me to say more. I said more. I went home that afternoon and told my mother I had talked to the counselor, and my mother called my sister that night, and Claudia called me the next morning. She said, very gently, Wren, I'm not trying to hurt you when I correct the record. I just love you too much to let you believe something that isn't real. I did not go back to the counselor. I tried again at 19, talking to a college roommate who was studying psychology and had a lot of frameworks to offer. She gave me vocabulary I had never had. I went home for Thanksgiving with that vocabulary, and I used it carefully, gently at the dinner table. My mother went very still. Claudia looked at me the way you look at someone who has said something embarrassing in front of company. Later, in the kitchen, Claudia said, I understand you're working through some things. I just wish you'd talk to a professional before you apply those kinds of labels to our family. It isn't fair to any of us. That was the pattern. Every attempt to name it became further evidence of my unreliability. Every framework I brought home got folded back into the original claim that I was a person whose feelings consistently ran ahead of the facts, and that the kindest thing the people who loved me could do was gently correct the record. What I think now, and this took me until I was 24 to understand with anything close to real clarity, is that Claudia was not lying. She genuinely believed the version she was describing. She had to believe it. Claudia was 11 years old when I was 6, and she was watching something happen in our house that nobody was naming, and she did not have the tools to name it either. What she had was the instinct to make it stop feeling dangerous. The strategy she arrived at, borrowed, I think, from watching my mother handle her own discomfort exactly the same way, was to decide that uncomfortable things were not happening. To manage them into non-existence with patient explanation and calm authority. She was not cruel. She was a child trying to organize the world into something survivable. And she learned it from someone who learned it from someone else. That is a wound that travels through families without anyone carrying it consciously, generation after generation of people who decided that the correct response to pain was to determine that the pain was mistaken. I do not say that to excuse what 20 years of it did to me. I say it because I think it matters, deeply, to understand the difference between someone who hurts you deliberately and someone who hurts you because they have never been shown another way. Both of those things happened to me. Understanding which took longer than it should have. The March afternoon I found the photograph, I drove home to Columbus, without calling anyone. I stopped for gas outside of Newark and sat in the parking lot of the station for a few minutes with the engine running and the photograph in my coat pocket and my phone in my hand, and I did not call anyone. I watched a minivan pull in, a man get out and stretch his back. I drove the rest of the 4 hours in the particular silence of someone who is holding something very carefully and does not want to jostle it. I worked in graphic design at a small studio near the short north, exposed brick walls, too many houseplants, 6 people with strong opinions about typography, and oat milk. I was the most junior person there by 4 years, first job out of school, still in the phase where every project felt like a test I might fail. My boss Dara had been running the studio for 8 years and had developed a calibrated sense for the emotional temperature of any room she walked into. She said nothing when I came in Monday morning, quieter than usual. She left a coffee on my desk at 9 o'clock, the good kind from the place 2 blocks over, with a sticky note, talk or don't, either is fine. I kept that sticky note on my monitor for 3 weeks. My best friend Jess Okafor had been hearing the outline of the story since the first week of college, when I tried to explain my family to her over dining hall pasta, and she listened without interrupting until I was finished. Jess was a nursing student then, and is a nurse now, and she has the particular quality of someone trained to gather information before drawing conclusions. When I sent her a photo of the photograph that Sunday night, just the image, no caption, she texted back after 8 minutes. How do you feel? Not, what are you going to do? Not, I told you so. Just, how do you feel? I thought about that question for 2 full days. I went to work. I built out a logo set for a bakery client in Clintonville. They wanted something warm and hand-lettered, and I gave them 3 options, and they liked none of them exactly right. I redesigned a real estate flyer for a woman in Bexley who needed it by Wednesday. I ate lunch at my desk on Tuesday, a bag of pretzels and a coffee I had reheated twice, and I thought about the photograph the whole time. About being 6 years old in a yellow dress with white lace at the collar, crying in my grandparents' backyard about something I no longer remembered the specifics of. Only the feeling, only the vague shape of something that had needed attention and had not received it. And then about 20 years of being told that feeling was a misread. Some memories refuse to be edited. They wait in cardboard boxes under masking tape labels, and when you find them again, you realize they were never asking to be believed by anyone else. They were just waiting for you to believe yourself. I understood, sitting at my desk with my cold coffee and my half-eaten pretzels, that this was what I had been trying to find for 20 years. Not proof to show them. Proof to show myself. The photograph did not change what had happened, or what had been said, or what had been taken from me. But it said, plainly and without argument, you were not confused. You were there. You were in pain. It was real. I did not decide to send the photograph in a single moment of clarity. I decided the way you decide most things that have been building for a long time, gradually, and then all at once, and then you are already in the parking lot before you have fully admitted to yourself what you are doing. Wednesday evening, I found Claudia's Pittsburgh address from the birthday card I had sent 18 months ago. I wrote it in my notes app. I did not text her. Thursday morning before work, I stopped at the drugstore on Indianola Avenue. The photo counter opened at 8. I put my phone on the scanner and ordered 1 print for by 6, standard glossy. It cost 39 cents and was ready in 11 minutes. I bought a padded envelope, 1 stamp, and a pack of small index cards, 3 inches by 5. At the self-checkout counter, I wrote on 1 card, Easter 2004. I found this in Mom and Dad's attic. I don't need you to explain it.
I just wanted you to see it. Wren.
9 sentences I could have written. 14 things I could have said. I wrote 4. I drove to the post office on North 4th Street and pulled into the lot. I parked, turned off the car, and I sat there. It was 8:22 in the morning. The lot was half full. The quiet half full of an early Thursday before the commute rush fully clears. A woman in a puffy down vest was loading packages into a minivan 2 spaces over, efficient, unhurried, clearly someone who does this regularly. A man in a yellow safety vest leaned against a pickup scrolling his phone, exhaling steam in the cold air. The sky was the flat gray-white of early March in Ohio, the color of a winter that is technically over but hasn't received the memo. I had the envelope on my lap, the padded kind, light, improbably flimsy for something that felt this weighted. I held it with both hands, not gripping, just resting my palms against it, feeling the small rectangle of the photograph through the paper. I thought about what I was doing. Not strategically, I had been over the strategy, and it was simple. Send a photograph with a 4-sentence note. No accusations. No demands. No requirement for acknowledgement or apology. Just, I wanted you to see it. What I was actually sitting with in that parking lot was Claudia, at 11, standing in the backyard in the navy dress, arm around a crying 6-year-old. Looking directly at the camera. I had been angry at that image for 3 days, the clean, clarifying anger of someone who has found evidence for something she always knew. The anger was still there, but sitting there with the envelope in my lap, it had moved over to make room for something else. Something that felt, uncomfortably, like sorrow. She was 11 years old. She was in that house too. She had developed a strategy for surviving it, the same way I had developed mine, and her strategy had cost me something, but it had cost her something too, some capacity for sitting with discomfort, some tolerance for the messy and painful and inconvenient. She had smoothed it all into order, and in doing so had smoothed herself into a particular kind of distance from things that were real. I did not forgive her in the parking lot, but I held both things at once for a few minutes, The fact of what the photograph showed, and the fact that we were two children in the same backyard on the same afternoon, each of us doing the only thing we knew how to do. Then I got out of the car, went inside, and dropped the envelope in the outgoing mail slot. I walked back to my car and sat for another 6 minutes. The woman with the packages had driven away. The man in the yellow vest was gone. The lot was quieter. I called Jess on the drive to the studio. "I mailed it," I said. "How do you feel?" she said. "Like I'm waiting," I said. "That's right," Jess said. "That's exactly right." I drove the rest of the way to the studio with the radio off. I parked in the lot behind the building and sat in the car for one more minute before going in. Dara was already at her desk when I arrived, coffee in hand, reading something on her monitor. She glanced at me over her glasses, and I could see her take the temperature of the room in her usual 3-second way, and then she nodded and went back to her screen. I sat at my desk and looked at the sticky note, "Talk or don't, either is fine," and I thought I did the thing. Now I wait. Waiting turned out to be its own kind of work.
It was not anxious waiting.
It was the strange, suspended quiet of someone who has let go of something they have been holding for a very long time, and who is not yet sure what they are going to do with their hands. I worked. I finished the bakery logo revisions. They went with a third option after all, and I started a new project for a small nonprofit that needed updated brand materials. I texted Jess updates that were mostly just, "Nothing yet." She responded to each one with, "Okay." That was enough. Claudia did not respond for 11 days. I had not expected her to respond immediately. I had not been certain she would respond at all. What I braced for was one of three things: silence, a brief and composed message explaining why I was still misremembering, or a call from my mother asking what I thought I was doing. I woke up each morning for the first week mildly convinced one of them was about to happen. What actually happened first was a text from my Aunt Marguerite. Marguerite was my mother's older sister. She had lived 4 blocks from the house on Fenwick Road my entire life, been at every family Easter, every Thanksgiving, every birthday large enough to involve the extended family. She was the kind of woman who noticed things and did not always say so, who moved through family events with quiet attention and made mental notes she rarely shared. She had a small dog named Pepper who came to everything, and a particular green cardigan she wore regardless of weather, and a way of saying exactly the right amount and no more. On day 4 she texted me, "Wren, honey, call me when you can." No punctuation at the end. No emoji. Just that. I called her that evening, standing in my kitchen with just the lamp on, the spider plant on the windowsill throwing soft shadows across the counter. She picked up on the second ring. "Your sister called me," she said. "Okay," I said. She wanted to know if I remembered Easter 2004. Specifically. A pause. "I do remember it. I was there, Wren. You'd had a very hard afternoon before the photos were taken. You'd been trying to tell your mom something, and your mom was distracted. There was a lot going on in the house that year. A renovation that had run over budget, some things between her and your dad. She didn't understand how upset you actually were until it was almost time for dinner." My back was against the refrigerator. I could hear someone's television through the apartment wall, a laugh track, distant and periodic. "What did you tell Claudia?" I asked. "I told her I remembered it," Aunt Marguerite said, "and that I had always hoped someone would eventually bring it up." A short pause. She didn't say much after that. She thanked me and got off the phone fairly quickly. "Did she know?" I asked. "At the time, while it was happening." Marguerite was quiet for a moment. "I think she knew something was wrong," she said carefully. "I think she was a child who had figured out that her job was to keep things from getting worse, to smooth things over before they became a scene. I don't think she knew that was what she was doing. I think she thought she was helping." After we hung up, I stayed against the refrigerator for a while with my phone in my hand. The lamp. The laugh track through the wall. The spider plant. 20 years of being told the shape of what I remembered was a product of my own unreliable feeling. And now there was Marguerite, who had been in that backyard, who had always hoped someone would bring it up. There was the photograph somewhere in the Pittsburgh postal system. There was the index card in Claudia's future hands. I just wanted you to see it. A family can sustain almost any story about itself for a very long time. What it cannot sustain is the moment when the evidence stops cooperating. Claudia called on the 11th day. It was a Sunday in early April. I was at my kitchen table working on the freelance illustration I had been commissioned for 3 weeks earlier, a children's book about a small bird that kept choosing to build its nest in impractical places. A gutter, a mailbox, the top of an open umbrella. My friend Jess's friend had written it and needed 6 illustrations by the end of the month, and I had been looking forward to the project in the way I look forward to work that is entirely mine. No committee, no revision cycles, no one to tell me the warm tones read as garish on mobile screens. My phone lit up with Claudia's name, and I looked at it for 2 full rings. Then I answered.
Hi, I said.
Hi. Her voice was careful, not cold, careful, the particular careful of someone choosing each word before she commits to it. I got your envelope. I know. Silence. Then, I don't remember that afternoon. The part where you were crying. I have the memory of the photograph. I remember the photo being taken. I remember standing in that backyard, but I don't have the afternoon that goes with it. Okay, I said. I called Aunt Marguerite. She told me. Another silence. She said you've been trying to tell Mom something. I think so. I don't remember what specifically anymore. I remember the feeling of not being heard. She said Mom didn't realize how upset you were. That's what Marguerite said. Claudia breathed out slowly, audibly. The sound of something being released from a room kept carefully locked. I told you were imagining things, she said. So many times. Over so many years. You did. I didn't think I was lying.
She stopped.
Started again, more slowly. I genuinely did not think I was lying. I thought that was what happened, that you were upset about something else entirely, and the feeling had attached itself to that afternoon. I thought that was a pattern with you, that you conflated the feeling and the event. I looked at the bird on my screen, sitting in the gutter, completely satisfied with its impractical choice. I know you believed it, I said. That doesn't make it okay. No, I said. It doesn't. We talked for 43 minutes. Not about everything, there was far too much for one call, and I was aware of that, careful not to try to pour 20 years into a single conversation and expect it to hold. We talked about the house in general terms, about the particular quality of growing up in a place where certain things were managed out of existence rather than addressed, about the exhaustion of being the person in a family who sees something the family has agreed not to see. Claudia had her own version of that exhaustion. I had not expected that. Different in shape. Aimed in a different direction. But real. Something she had been carrying too. At the end she said, I'm going to call Mom. Okay. I don't know what I'm going to say yet. That's okay, I said. After we hung up, I sat with my phone in my hand for a while, looking at the bird on my laptop screen, building its nest in the gutter. Entirely unbothered by the logic of the situation. I texted Jess. She called. We talked. She's calling Mom. Jess texted back within a minute. How do you feel? I put the phone down and looked at the bird for a long time before I answered her. My mother called 2 days later, on a Tuesday evening. I was walking home from the studio in the thin, non-committal drizzle of an Ohio April that can't quite commit to being actual rain. I stopped on the sidewalk outside the dry cleaner on 5th Avenue, under a fluorescent sign that buzzed and flickered every few seconds, and answered. Claudia told me she talked to you. My mother said. She did. She told me about the photograph. A pause. I didn't know you still thought about that Easter. I've always thought about it, I said. She was quiet. The buzzing sign buzzed. A couple walked past with their collars turned up, moving through the drizzle, without looking at each other or at me. I wasn't always present the way I should have been. She said it carefully, in the voice of someone who has thought about how to say it. That year was hard in ways I never explained to you. There were things between your father and me, and the house had gone badly over budget, and I was not paying attention the way I should have been. She stopped herself. But that's an explanation for me, not for you. I don't want to offer it as a reason you should feel differently about what happened. Okay, I said. I'm sorry, Wren. I'm sorry I didn't ask what was wrong. That afternoon and in general. For longer than that. I stood under the buzzing sign. The drizzle settled on my hair. 3 words had taken 20 years to arrive. They arrived on a Tuesday evening outside a dry cleaner in Columbus, Ohio, under a sign that buzzed every few seconds, in the ordinary voice of a woman who had been my mother my whole life and was saying something true and overdue. It was not the scene I had imagined. I had imagined it with more ceremony. A kitchen table, a cup of tea, a long conversation that addressed everything fully and arrived at something clean. What I got was a sidewalk in the drizzle and 3 sentences, and a buzzing sign. "Thank you," I said. "That matters." We talked for a few minutes more, carefully, neither of us pushing for more than the moment could hold. I told her I was okay. She said she was glad I had found the photograph. We said goodbye, and I stood there for a moment after we hung up, holding my wet phone, watching the couple who had passed me turn the corner and disappear. I walked the rest of the way home in the drizzle. I bought soup at the deli on High Street, chicken noodle, steaming when I peeled the lid. I ate it at my kitchen table with the bird illustration open on my laptop, and I thought, that is how it works. Not in the scene you spent 20 years practicing for. Not with the careful speech you wrote and rewrote. In a buzzing doorway, and the thin rain, and the ordinary voice. 3 words. And something that had been held very tightly for a very long time beginning, slowly, to let go. In the days after that call I noticed something I had not expected. I had thought receiving an apology would feel like an arrival, like reaching a place I had been walking toward for a long time. What it actually felt like was more like the morning after a long illness, not recovered, not well, but no longer quite so sick. Still tender, still needing to be careful, but able to eat, able to move through a room without bracing for the next impact. I called Jess that weekend and tried to explain it. She listened in her nursing school way, fully present, no editorializing. When I finished, she said, "That sounds about right." I asked her what she meant. "The apology doesn't fix the 20 years, she said. "It just confirms that you weren't wrong about them." That was it exactly. The apology did not give me back what had been taken. It just confirmed that something real had been taken, that I had not invented the taking. There is still a great deal that is not resolved between my mother, my sister, and me. I want to be honest about that because stories have a way of implying more tidiness than the actual thing. We are not a repaired family. What we are is a family that has recently admitted, together, that we have been operating on a version of events that was not entirely real. That is the beginning of something. It is not the end of anything. I see Dr. Claire Ashby every other Thursday at 5:30. She has an office in the short north, near my studio, and a spider plant on her windowsill that looks like it should have given up years ago but keeps quietly producing new shoots. She asked me, at the session after the phone calls, what I thought had made the photograph work where all the words had not. Because it couldn't be argued with, I said. Everything I ever said with words could be reframed. I was exaggerating. I was misremembering. I was too emotional to perceive things accurately. The photograph just showed what it showed. It didn't have a tone of voice. It didn't have a history of being unreliable. "And what does it mean for you," she said, "to have had that confirmed?" I thought about the girl in the yellow dress. "It means she was real," I said. "It means she wasn't confused. She was there, she was in pain, she needed something, and the fact that nobody gave it to her doesn't mean she didn't need it. It means she was a real child with a real need, and the family's inability to meet it doesn't retroactively make the need not exist." Dr. Ashby let that sit for a moment, the way she does with the things that are complete as they are. What I know now, after all of this, sounds simple when you say it out loud. It took a long time to actually believe. Memory is not unreliable, because it feels things. Memory is unreliable when it mistakes the story it was told for the thing it actually lived through. I lived through that backyard. The photograph and I were both there. The photograph is not sensitive. It is not imagining things. It is not rewriting history to make itself the victim. It is 4 inches by 6 inches of light and chemistry, holding the moment exactly as the moment was, waiting in a cardboard box for someone to open the lid. A family will maintain almost any story about itself for as long as no one introduces evidence. The evidence does not have to be dramatic. It does not have to be irrefutable.
It just has to exist.
One photograph. One aunt who was in the backyard and always hoped someone would bring it up. One moment when the story and the evidence stop matching, and someone has to decide which one to keep. The cost of keeping the peace in a house where peace means the smallest person stays confused is not just her childhood. The story follows her until someone puts the evidence back in her hands and says, "Your memory was not wrong. Your feeling was not wrong. You were there. You were real. You needed something." Forgiveness is not a destination. I am not at the end of anything. I am somewhere in the honest middle, the part where I know what I know and I do not need to perform certainty about what comes next. I can hold sorrow for Claudia at 11 without excusing the adult who spent 20 years telling me I was imagining things. I can accept my mother's apology without pretending it undoes what it was meant to undo. Some people only know how to love what they can keep orderly. When a child's need is not orderly, when it is loud and wet-faced and specific and demands a kind of attention they don't know how to give, they file it away as a misunderstanding. They teach the child to file it away too. Learning to take the file back out of the drawer is slow, unglamorous work. It does not come with a scene. It comes with a parking lot at 8:22 in the morning and a 39-cent photograph and 11 days of silence, and then a phone call on a Sunday afternoon. Saying the truth out loud did not make me dramatic. It did not make me the person they always implied I was. It made me the person who opened the box and held what she found. If you have been the person in your family who is told, gently, patiently, repeatedly, with the best of intentions, that what you remembered was wrong, I want to ask you something. What evidence have you been holding? What has been waiting in the attic of your own life, not to prove anything to anyone else, but just to prove something to yourself? You were there. What you remember is yours. You do not need their version to correct it. What would change if you let yourself believe that?